Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ninth, I believe, webinar with Ingrid, Maynard and myself, and this time with our special guest, Sam Trattles. Ingrid is the CEO and founder of The Sales Doctor, providing sales coaching and training for sales teams and getting them to perform and perform well. My name is Richard Forrest. I lead Forrest Marketing Group, which is a B2B sales lead generation company. Ingrid, if it's okay with you, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce Sam, and then we can get into the webinar. People are still logging in now, but that's okay. They can catch up, and we'll send them the video after the webinar too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. I'm so excited to have Sam here today. Fantastic. So Sam is the founder and lead strategist of The Other Side of the Table. She's also the author of 2 books, I Love Negotiating and Negotiate Your Worth. Sam has worked on both sides of the deals table throughout her career with 20 years in corporate marketing roles, and has negotiated some of the biggest deals in recent history in sport, the arts, music, community and industry-specific programs. Big or small, each deal was built with long-term partnerships in mind. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes, welcome, Sam.
So, Sam, let's kick off. Now, you say that negotiations are not a fight. What does that mean?
Well, I think when you ask most people what's the first word that comes to mind when it comes to negotiating, it's generally a fight, or it's adversary, or it's uncomfort. And I don't believe it has to be that way. And I try and scratch around and find out, well, why is that? Why do we think it's a fight? And for me, it's because we haven't seen it demonstrated well very often. We go into situations where the most preparation most people do before they go is grab a cup of tea. So I'm all about saying, hang on a minute, let's work out how do we de-stress this, because it causes such anxiety, and especially when we're negotiating for ourselves. Yeah. So our own worth, that's very, very challenging. So for me, no, it's not a fight. I mean, I've seen fights, don't worry. I've seen plenty of deal fights in my time. But the reason why I do what I do is because I've decided that that is no longer negotiating. If you're fighting, you're at that point where either you need a mediator, which I am not a mediator. That's mediators are the unpicking of things that haven't gone well. Right. But if you're going into it, you need to be thinking about, well, what is it that's important to me and my team and the outcome I want.
Yeah. Wow.
Interesting. James Michael just posted in the chat. Thank you, James. Negotiation is often what we fall back on when everything else has failed, and that's right. You end up in that battle, and you go, okay, now we need to negotiate, don't you? And actually, negotiation should be prior to and friendly, I suppose, as opposed to adversarial. And I think I'm fascinated by negotiation. I always have been. I really enjoy it. And one of the things that I've heard over and over again is that negotiation is about seeking a win-win. And I'm going to ask you whether you agree with that in a second, but I remember years ago, somebody opening my eyes, I was very young at the time, with by telling me that if you say no, that is a negotiation. A negotiation doesn't have to be, we come to some point in the middle. You can say no, and that's your negotiating position. But about win-win, do you agree that negotiation is always about seeking a win-win? And how do people, salespeople especially, go about achieving that?
It's my favorite question. No, it's not about winning. So being good Aussie girl, when I think about winning and I think about not winning, I don't think about coming second. So there's a problem, because we think you either get gold or you come last. So from our cultural perspective, win-win doesn't work for Australians. The other thing it doesn't work for is our brain. So our lizard brain, it actually, when it starts to thinking about winning, thinks about losing, and that thinks I need to be in the safe mode. So I'm either fight, flight, or the freeze reaction kicks in. So we're in risky territory by even trying that. I mean, I've never ever, maybe think about that for a sec. Very, very rarely have I gone in and got exactly everything that I asked for. that's a win to me. So yeah, it's really about thinking about, well, what's my position? So what do I want when I step into this room? What will I settle for? And what will I walk away from that deal with? And if we think about those three positions, it doesn't matter what the currency is, because currency can be money, people, or time. So we have to think about what is the makeup of those three components. And for me, the walk away is the most important, because that's when I can either get cranky, or I can go, no, that's cool. We're not actually going to reach agreement here. We're actually so far apart. Let's call it. Let's call it a day. So, you know, Australia's a small place. We see the same people over and over again. So getting cranky in the situation is going to bite us back later on. So I think it's about the preparation. I think it's about thinking, when I step into this room, who am I meeting and what do they want from the situation? So we may have met this person many times before. We may never have met them. And if we haven't met them, it's very easy to research who they are, find somebody who knows them, or even just look at their job title. If they're a CFO, they want the numbers. If they're the CMO, they want the pictures. You know, if they're in procurement, they want the bottom line. So thinking about that position and what are their pushbacks going to be to you? So really thinking about what am I walking into, and then what do I need to think about and bring to that table before I get there.
So what you're saying then for salespeople is that negotiation, I'm going to put a number to it, 80%, just because it's an easy number. 80% of negotiation is about going in prepared, knowing who you're meeting and planning what you want, what you're prepared to take and what you're prepared to walk away from, so that you're clear going in, rather than just going in and saying, I've got a sales negotiation here, I'll wing it. You may not think you're winging it, but just, I'm going in, I'm going to have to negotiate. Actually planning what those positions are is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I say 70%, so very close. So, so 70% based on how important this is. So it might be a 15-minute meeting. So all you need to do is sit down and write down 3 things. And you know, what is my case? Why do I deserve it? Why is it now? And then what's my walkaways and my ideal and dream numbers? So I think, you know, we deal with graziers in the Northern Territory who, you know, we often say to them, from the farmhouse to the gate, you can think about what you want from that conversation with the person who's at the gate. But if it's a really big deal, really complex deal, then how are you using your team as part of your gameplay? So if there's 5 of you going into that negotiation, who's playing good cop, who's playing bad cop, who's going to drop the number? You know, I believe there are no mutes in meetings. So rattle the people, get the junior person to actually drop the number, and then use silence as your friend.
Interesting.
See why people bring Sam, you know, to be part of their team and to coach them and train them. Like that's extraordinary. Wow. So, you know, those people who say, well, you know, my approach to negotiation has served me well up until this point. Why do I need to do anything differently? What would you say to them?
Don't.
Okay.
If it's working, keep going with it. It's, you know, you're not going to change anything about yourself unless you want to.
Yeah.
So it's really just about, I try and help people who are uncomfortable about it. So 87% of people say that they're apprehensive about negotiating. It's a huge number. And that scares me. That's, you know, my first book was called I Love Negotiating, and it has hate crossed out in the creative, because so many of my mates, extremely talented senior people, hate negotiating. And so I said, well, shit, this is crazy, excuse me. How outrageous that these extremely talented people don't love this one thing that makes up everything we do every day.
It's true.
We make 35,000 decisions every day. Most of those are about what we eat. But how many of those are we consciously participating in negotiations, and how many are we letting them happen to us? And bystanders for? So it's about the choice we make and how it makes us feel. You know, the nervousness and the anxiety that negotiating causes, that's what I'm trying to change.
And preparation's got a big part to play there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry,
I remember because you're talking about decision making, which is kind of what negotiation is. You make your decision whether you will accept this or you won't. An easy example of that is the negotiation you do with yourself. You're driving along in your car and you go, I need fuel for the car. And you drive past the first servo and it's selling fuel at, let's say, $2 a litre, and you get to the next one, it's $1.95. Or shall I stop there or shall I go on? And the easy way to take that out, take the stress out of it, is to decide what you'll accept. I'm going to stop at the first petrol station that sells fuel for under $1.95, $1.95 or less. As soon as you see it, you don't go, I wonder if there's a better deal down the track. You just go, it meets my criteria, I'm going in. And it comes back to your preparation and making that decision just on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. You have to, sometimes when we go into the negotiation table and we get what we want, often people will walk away going, damn it, I should have asked for more. Yes. No, you got what you wanted. So don't pick yourself. Like, this is what we do to ourselves a lot, is that we get something that's good, we ask for something and we got it, then we punish ourselves. So the bulk of Australians fit this persona that I call being a dabbler, and that they would go into Bingley or JB Hi-Fi and they would be brave enough to ask for a discount or a better price, and then they'll negotiate with themselves. So you might say, oh, that watch says $350, can I buy it for, would you do it for $325? And then it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's okay, it's all right, no problem. Yeah. So they punish themselves on so many different levels because they've caused themselves so much stress to actually be brave enough to ask the question. Then they get embarrassed because they feel like they look like they need it, and then they say, don't worry about it. It's like, so you didn't get anything except pain and suffering for that. So we just need to be able to be appreciative of our own capabilities, to prove to ourselves, oh, I can do that, I can ask that question, is that your best price? And then be quiet and wait for them to answer, because the answer is yes, no, or maybe. And so the nervousness is, what will they say? So have an answer for yes, no, and maybe, and you'll be right. Yeah.
Can I just ask, because you've talked about this twice, or you mentioned it twice, you've talked about silence as a negotiating tool. Could you talk a bit more about how to use that and how to be comfortable with silence? Because it is a friend, as you said.
It is, yeah. So I have this concept of 15 seconds of pain. And so if you're dropping the number or, landing a big point in the negotiation, you've got to have time for it to live. So, say it out loud and then be busy. So your pen, write invisible things on your piece of paper. But what's happening for the other person is they're listening to what you said, they're processing what you said, then they're thinking about what they say in return and what are the 3 things that could happen here. Do I make a mistake? Do I say something good? Do I ask a question? So you actually need to give them that airtime so that they can do all those things in such a short space of time. Right. If you then instead talk over the top of them, again, you're negotiating with yourself. So I say 15 seconds, and anybody out there who uses this technique, if someone lasts more than 15 seconds, please let me know, because I have 2 clients who can do that. Most of them are in regional Australia, right, because they like to think a lot more. And and so if you time 15 seconds, it is a very long time. Yep. So give that person their time that they need. I think 8 seconds is about the amount of time that people will respond in. But if you fill it, then you break that.
Because I want to know why, or what your opinion is about why we have this association with the word negotiation, and why it brings up those feelings of anxiety, or I can't do it, or oh, this is how I do it, or
yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the psychology behind it, but I certainly think that, like most things, that we don't really know what they are and what's good. So strategy is another word that people are like, oh, I don't really know what strategy means. Yes. So we feel like we have to. It's like going to a wedding. You feel like you've got to put your best outfit on, even though it's a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah. So, if we knew what it was and we understood how to do it, then we wouldn't have this strange relationship with it. Yeah. But negotiations never happen very rarely happen in one meeting. So we really need to see them as a conversation or a series of conversations and break it down. So particularly when you're dealing with big things, then we're not going to sell that thing at the one meeting.
Yeah.
So how do I make it easier to negotiate components of it? So am I having the first meeting where we're all together and we're all talking about our little pieces of it? And then do I set up a series of 15-minute meetings?
Yeah.
That is, we're going to talk about this one part of the contract.
Yeah.
And we're only taking that person, and that person, and me.
Right.
And then each of those 15-minute meetings got different people in it for
Yep.
different reasons.
Yep.
Legal, procurement, blah, 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 blah. So that way, we're not in these protracted discussions.
Yep.
And everybody's like, oh, we're going to that meeting again. So really trying to think about, how do I get from A to B in the shortest amount of time?
Yeah.
That's by being most efficient and direct about which piece I need to have in that, to solve in that discussion.
Mm.
Because we're trying to find where we disagree. Whereas often we're like, oh, we'll page turn the contract. Let's okay, the 3.2.1. Okay, is everyone happy with that? Yeah, okay. So what we want to do is just go, where do we disagree?
Yeah.
And then we can see from the very first, early meetings, we can see, oh, we're actually way miles apart.
Wow. So you would go there early.
Yeah.
Deal with that, maybe over a series of little conversations. Until such a point that you've got more, I suppose, more that you agree about than less, and makes it easier.
Well, we're clear
Right.
where we disagree. And that's where one of the things that we're not so great at is decoupling.
Yep.
So we need to be clear on how are we closing. So closing, we like it if we can close the deal and it comes out to be a positive outcome. But sometimes, if you're getting every deal, you're ace, but that you're probably not pitching enough times. So, how do we exit when the deal's not for us? So, okay, please explain to me how you've come up with your valuation for that thing so I can understand. And then if we say, well, we came about it from this direction and we have to find another way to value it, or else there's this margin here. So we're now talking about this margin. So do you think you could come here and come here? Or are we ever going to reach this piece in the middle? Or is it, you know what, this deal's not good for either of us?
Right.
Call it.
Right. That's a position too, isn't it? That, sometimes we don't consider it's, because like you were saying, Richard, about that win-win or the win-lose or the walk-away piece. Well, yeah, sometimes that's okay. If it's not going to be beneficial for either party, that's okay.
And what has to happen?
Yeah.
Does something have to change for us to actually find that little piece in the middle to flex on? Or is it a never?
You're right.
I'm just going to go to the chat because we've got a few things. James said, I think the 15 seconds thing is also about paying respect to the other party to allow them to mull, which I think you'd agree is absolutely right. Yeah. And I have somebody else here, if I can get it to scroll. I think the truth is, and this is from Scott Carroll, I think the truth is that we're made to feel uncomfortable about negotiation as children when we aren't so scared to ask for what we want. We're told it's rude and not polite. And so it carries on to adulthood. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a seen and not heard household as well. And we have to break that, because if we accept that, that's a cultural taboo that we are passing on, living ourselves and then passing on to our children. So it's absolutely that we have to dam the taboos and communicate what we want. And I think this again comes from where the fight is. When we're kids, we're asking innocent questions, and we need to re-find, if that's possible, that innocence. I'm just coming into asking a series of questions. I'm really curious. How did you do that? Where did you guys come up with your approach to it? And that's the front cover of my new book's got an emu on it. And the emu has these, beautiful curiosity characteristics. And as negotiators, that reminds us that we should be able to ask good questions, not just 1,000 questions. I used to ask a lot of questions and then realized, oh no, be quiet a bit. But ask the questions that, those ones that are in the back of your head and you're like, I should have asked that question. Yep. Ask it, write it down on your piece of paper, and then Dan will ask it, because that there's a room full of people that are probably thinking the same thing, right, and too scared to ask because we're too polite. So yeah, definitely it's a carryover, and we need to consciously break it.
Yeah. So I think I'm just going to jump in. Helen's just said interesting about how our childhood experiences affect our thinking. My dad was the if you don't ask, you don't receive type of person. And of course, that's the flip side of the coin with that. John Edwards has said, I think negotiation within your organization has a lot to do with how decision making is made. If the key decisions are top down by senior management, then negotiation is very limited. If there is a bottom up decision making approach, then your negotiation approach can be much more flexible, creative and innovative. Which I like. I also think, though, it comes back to the first point you made, which is plan. When you go into that meeting, it might be it's a salary review, or it might be I'm selling to somebody, or I want to pitch a new project. Go in with your position, so you know what you really want, what you'd like to have, and what you're prepared to walk away with.
And I think, within organizations, there's a lot of silos, and we have to find our allies, and we have to negotiate in ways that probably doesn't feel like negotiating, like calling in favors. Ingrid, your team's just finished a big project, my team's in the thick of it. Can I have a couple of staff for a month and I'll pay you back later? That's a negotiation, and that's what we need to have, those allies across the business, so that we can deliver on our projects. But also, I owe you one. So you'll come, and I want you to come back and get that later. Well, I don't really want you to. No, but I know that you'll be there to come and ask me for it later on. So that's how we break down the silos, because otherwise we're just, I've got my KPIs or OKRs and I'm hitting those. Damn everybody else. So that's where the bottom up can have challenges as well, especially in the glass ceiling world that we live in Australia. So really having allies and making those asks. So, and challenging, I think the next generation are teaching us that you need to ask questions of senior leadership. And when it is top down, why? What's the worst that's going to happen by asking a question, why? I've learned that don't ask the question why, like, why are you doing it like that? Ask the question, I'm really curious. I'm only junior here, but where are we going with this? How does this ladder up to the bigger strategy? Can you explain it to me in a way that I understand? Because that's where my generation, we were too scared to ask questions like that. So we have to take the lead from generation next.
I think that's a good point about respect, that respect isn't silence, which is part of what, our generation was kind of taught with the seen and not heard stuff. It's about the way that we ask questions and our intention behind it. And if we're genuinely curious, then that will come across, and that's, people will pick up on that and be more than happy to answer those questions, even if they're a little uncomfortable. And
it doesn't mean you're not bricking it when you ask the question. You are nervous about it, but you sort of have to think, if I ask this question, what are the three things that they can come back to me with? What's the yes, no, maybe equivalent for it? And then what do I say next? If they come back and say, why are you asking that question? The response is, well, I'm actually genuinely curious. And no one can argue with, well, I'm sure people can, but yet hopefully most people would say, oh, okay, right, no problem. So it's about that, being ready for what's coming back across the table.
And what difference, coming back to the sales side of things, what difference will becoming a more effective negotiator have on my sales performance, anybody's sales performance?
Well, you'd hope that it's shortening that period of time where you are in the negotiation. If we're looking for, when we go into the room, we're looking for where we differ, because it's exciting where we agree. So we really want to be problem solvers together. So language is really important when you're solving, finding an outcome. And particularly when you're renegotiating with someone you've worked with for a long time, problem solving is important. We had this issue in the first contract. How are we going to address that when we're in the second contract? And the use of language in terms of we is really important. So often when you're in an adversary situation, it's like you and me and we need to do something about this. So it's really important to be coming into it together to say, right, well, we're going into partnership together by, closing this deal. So how do we solve these problems together? So sometimes you can't, sometimes there is no we, but being really conscious of changing that language to company X rather than you, and then company Y rather than me. So, or somebody in my position, or a reasonable person would think this. So, you know, coupling the relationship between it and us. Now, I've been in lots of sponsorship relationships where there's been things going left and right, and you're like, oh, I hate that brand right now. But if I hated on the person who was my account manager, then that's going to cause problems between the two of us. And it's not his fault or her fault. It's the business is doing the wrong thing by my business. And my job is the custodian of that brand is to get the best outcome. So it's really about that language change to say, okay, I'm thinking about this particular situation where we Telstra sponsored Vet Supercars and got to Bathurst, and I had this big B-double truck that opened out into a fancy shop and display, you know, so you could see the racetrack. And I arrived, and then there was a grandstand in front of my truck. And I rang Ben, my account manager, and I was like, I need you to come to the truck. And I said, what do you think is wrong with this situation? And it was, what are we going to do about this? Because they aren't going to move the grandstand. Someone's made a massive mistake. And so we had to come up with a solution. So yeah, it was a very tense hour or so, but ended up they had to, you know, give us seats in that grandstand for our customers. But if I had gone, Ben, what is going on?
Yeah.
His natural disposition is to say, I don't know, Sammy, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
There's a grandstand there.
Wasn't my decision.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I stopped him from being able to fight me because I came at him from not where he thought I would come at him from.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Isn't that interesting? And again, that's a great example of a negotiation that perhaps, you know, or I wouldn't necessarily think is a negotiation, but of course it is. You know, it's a conversation where you're trying to come up with a solution that's going to work. Yeah. You know, whatever that is. Yeah.
And you know, coming back to, I don't know everyone's sales situations, but you know, other things is if my budget is this and you think it's going to cost that, well, what are we going to take out of the bucket on either side of the ledger so that it is fair and equitable, fair and reasonable what's being exchanged there. So
that's right.
So we just need to find that problem solving thing is not about you just dropping your price or me just giving you more. Like that's not right.
Yeah.
So we need to find out, well, okay, if I take these things out, then that sort of feels like it sits in the right place. So that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. And I'm conscious that we've only got a couple of minutes left, but Sam, there's so much in that book. You know, negotiate your worth, you know, like, you know, what would a reasonable person would think this, and just so many little tips, and finding your personas, and the, you know, just some of the tips behind all of the illustrations are beautiful in this book, I must say as well. Just all of these Australian animals, and they all have particular characteristics, like Sam said about the emu. Just to kind of bring this home, what are the top 3 impacts of following your methodology towards negotiation?
Well, first of all, it's about understanding what are we aiming for. So, you know, me challenging win-win is no use if I don't have an alternative position. So for me, it's about finding what's fair and reasonable in the exchange. So that's coming together and having a conversation to see what is fair and reasonable. So for me, that was the first thing, was tell people how, you know, what's the new goal, as it were, alternative goal, and then thinking about what are the stages that I need to do. We all love to know what to do next, and we didn't really have, win-win didn't really give us a stage process. So knowing all the steps that you need to go through, which I talk through in the book, and really understanding that it's not a fight. It is coming together and having a conversation, which then in itself relaxes people. And how do you get more and more comfortable and confident? That's through your preparation. So really being clear before you go into the room, here's all my points. I have a little cheat sheet that's in the book, and just getting your thoughts right and thinking about how that other person might perceive things and where they might push back on you, and really thinking, okay, I feel comfortable with that again. And then the final piece is, I was not a good negotiator. I was very bolshy when I was younger and would try and get what's the best deal for me. And what I learned was that you can become a great negotiator by being a good communicator, by listening to people, by asking good questions. So I know this is a skill that people can learn, and it can be something that, yes, you get nervous, but you don't come at it with this, tension in your body. So I truly believe everyone can become a good negotiator. You just got to look for the times when you do a good job, and tell your staff, you did a great job there, Ingrid, when you actually delivered the number or explain this piece to the client. Those types of things we're looking for when we're doing a good job. Yeah. And that way we build on that next time. It's like, oh, I've got that bit licked. Okay, cool. And then I need to work on this piece and this piece and this piece. And then, in 12 months time or however long later, you'll just go, oh, yeah, I'm really good at this.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sit very well for Australians because we don't like to be arrogant.
Right.
But this is a big part of everything that we do. So really looking for the opportunities on a smaller scale to build into when you actually really need to find your voice. So if you're a really, really hesitant negotiator right now, have a very difficult coffee order, I'll ask for the salad dressing on the side. Not that these are negotiations, but they're ways to find your voice to ask for what you want.
Sort of like building a muscle.
Correct.
Yeah, good point. James kind of summed this up. He said, we pretty much negotiate all day in almost every aspect of our day. It's just that negotiation in sales brings us that much closer to perceived success or failure. But it comes back to the point you're making, which is actually you can practice in your day-to-day life. Just ask for the salad dressing or ask for this, and as Ingrid said, build the muscle. And practice. I think what we should do, if this is okay with you, Sam, is put a link to your book in with the information we send out after the webinar, so people can click on that and access your book if they would like to.
Yeah, beautiful. That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, for me, my goal is to help people enjoy it. And I know it sounds crazy, but people say they don't like sales. Normal people don't like sales, and you all do that every day. So you can love this thing. And it's about coming in and making it so that it's, you're laughing sometimes in the room. You can be, depending on your personality, you can be a bit cheeky, ask for a little bit more and those sorts of things. Like I've gotten out of countless parking fines by being polite to parking inspectors.
This is another reason why I need Sam.
So, finding what works for your personality and enjoying yourself every now and then, going, oh, wow. Even when it doesn't work, it's like, oh, we've got no chance of agreeing here, do we, Ingrid? It's not that I have to hate Ingrid. It's just like, well, it's not going to work. Yeah. So, let's talk again in 6 months' time and really find that place where we can still be mates and walk away from it, with respect for one another.
Incredible. Wow.
Fantastic. Ingrid, I'll let you wrap up. You understand very well.
I just feel so lucky to know Sam, and there's so much in the sales space that relies on effective negotiation skills, and I would probably suggest too that there's a lot of crossover between that preparation component in terms of what I strongly recommend salespeople do before they go into any conversation, which is really just a series of negotiations. And it's about being really clear about the outcome, having a plan, knowing where you want to land it, and being flexible about how you get there during the thing. I'm so grateful that you made the time for us today, and may it be maybe the first of many.
Yes, absolutely. Again, from me too, Sam, thank you very much for coming today. Been a lot of interest in this session. It's been really good. For those of you who are on the webinar, we will send a recording out later this week, and with a link to Sam's book. Ingrid, Sam, great to see you both. Thank you very much. See you again soon.
Thanks again, Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.